Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Hello and welcome to Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm Becky Parker-Geist and I'm your host. Audiobook Connection is your place to learn about the audiobook creative process in discussions between the authors, narrators, producers, and post-production teams that bring them all together, as well as guests who have listened to the audiobooks and have questions for the creative teams. This podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. And today I have with me Jim Christopher. Jim is the author of The Utopian Testament, series of psychological thrillers, which includes 2 novels so far, Season of Waiting, which is Utopian Testament Book 1, and Sick as Our Secrets, Book 2. Jim, welcome.
Thank you, Becky. It's good to be here.
So I thought it would be fun to jump in and start off with hearing a little bit more about you and the writing itself. How long have you been writing?
So I'll start by saying Season of Waiting was the first book I finished writing. There are lots that I never finished.
Oh, yeah.
We can add those up.
That's the life of a writer, right?
Yeah, exactly. I guess that's the way it's supposed to be. You should have a lot more undone than done. But I've been writing stories since I was a kid, and it took me a long time to figure out how to get past a couple of pages of story. And it wasn't until I got older. Well, I won't say how old, but it took me a long time to sort of build up the storytelling to a point where I had something the size of a novel to spit out, So, but I mean, it's always been, storytelling's always been kind of a part of life. Tucking my kids in at night and then, we had story time, and, that was always a blast. And, or even like stuff I do in my day job around teaching and learning, that's all storytelling too.
Yeah.
It's all the same psychology. So
I'm curious, did your parents make up stories for you when you were kids?
Yes, not always. They weren't always fun. When I was a really young kid, I was a little rambunctious, and one day I did something. I don't remember what it was, but my parents were lovely people. Let me just preface it by saying this, but my mom turned to me and said, "Knock it off or I'll pop your butt." And my dad caught the look I had on my face, was this very confused, like, wait a minute, like, what is that? Makes sense, but I don't know what you mean by that. It's kind of like, and he saw this look on my face, and so he grabbed the opportunity. He was like, that's right, Jim. She's going to pop your butt. She's going to go to her sewing kit and pull out a needle, and she's going to pop your butt like a balloon. And then you'll have to sit crooked for the rest of your life. And I was horrified.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So, but yeah, like there were a ton of, usually centered around some kind of humorous attempt at humor, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, like there was a lot of stories in the house growing up.
Now that you're a novelist, as well as a series, writing a series,
mm-hmm.
What's your aspiration moving forward? What are your plans?
What are my aspirations moving forward? Well, I don't want to stop.
Cool. That's good.
Step one. So, to be perfectly blunt, I took the binoculars out earlier and I looked ahead, and I'm way closer to retirement than I am to starting a career. So at this point, I really just want something that will ease me into retirement, not from a financial perspective, but more of like I guess this is what I'm doing now. Uh-huh. It's definitely like, now that I've kind of caught the snap of how to get books done, I wish I had started earlier. Like, I wish I had known that 20, 30 years ago. And so, yeah, so I have this almost like panic inside me of like lost time. Like, there's a lot of stuff I want to get done, but yeah, so I really just want ease in retirement. Income would be great, but if I have to eat out of cans or whatever, I'll do that too. But this is really just looking to make a pile of books that's going to outlast me. I think is the way I'm looking at it now.
Well, you must enjoy it, or you wouldn't
Yes,
have that feeling.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's great.
Absolutely.
So do you have any sense of like where the stories come from for you? Like how do they get started? Where do those inspirations come from?
Yeah. So a lot of it, and it's always been this way for me, there's been little incidents or events or quirks of a personality that kind of stick with me, right? And so like these elements of life, or even an idea but it's not connected to anything, and those things kind of pile up, and I guess they have for a long time. And I guess the idea for the story really comes out of like by finding like common traces between those things, like why things are funny, or I get like another thing that I always kind of love about life and observing things is balance, right? Like there's a lot of good things that come out of living your life, a lot of bad things too, and everything's like that. Any situation you find yourself in, you can find the good or the bad. And, I've always enjoyed kind of pulling apart those kind of perspectives and figuring out why someone would view it one way or the other. Like for example, like with Season of Waiting, for example, the nut of that story came out of this incident in high school where like I was in, I think it was physics class, and we weren't talking about physics. We were doing homework, and the teacher was just chewing the fat with some of the students, and he mentioned something about like he was deaf in one ear, and like the main character in Season of Waiting is also deaf in one ear. But he's talking about how he was riding his bike to school that day, and he had just gone through like a kind of a religious rebirth, and then kind of had this reconnection with his spirituality and stuff. But he's coming to work and almost got sideswiped by a car, and so he's freaking out, really nervous, and he kind of pulls the bike over and stops, and he literally says to himself, I could have just died. And he swears he heard in his deaf ear someone say, it doesn't matter now, does it? You're mine, kind of a thing, like it's okay. And I like that. When I heard that, I remember feeling like chills, like that would creep me out. Like if I was deaf in my ear my whole life and all of a sudden the voice shows up on me, like something's wrong, you know? But a lot of other folks sitting around the table were like enraptured with this idea of hearing the voice and what does it mean for me? And so like that kind of thing sticks with me. Like, why do I think that is terrifying and someone else would find it extremely comforting, and that's, you pull that apart and you get a story. There's conflict in there.
You've kind of conjured in my mind this picture of you in this sort of like closet or room of collection where you gather these little experiences and characters, and then you go in there and start looking at how they fit together. Is that like your experience?
Yeah. I think so. I crochet a lot. Okay. And I use that as a metaphor for a lot of things. Yeah. Like just the zen of each stitch coming after the next one, and a lot of times the story is the same way. It's pulling together the pieces and then stitching it together and having the common thread make the story come together.
So tell me a little bit about the significance of the titles, Season of Waiting and Sick as Our Secrets.
I spent a lot of time thinking about these, and I probably spent too much time. I was looking for something that sounded like a thriller, like when you read it, it had that punchy kind of whatever. Didn't really land on that, I don't think. But what I did find was like I was looking for something for Season of Waiting. For example, I was looking for something that sort of captured this notion of folks who, like the main character, who's kind of waiting for his purpose to be revealed, right? And I've heard this kind of expression before. There's a lot of folks who are like, they feel like God has a plan for them, and they're just sort of waiting for the plan to show up, And then I found that there is actually a phrase for that, and that folks who are in sort of the spiritual self-help realm like to call that a season of waiting, when you have, like you have a purpose, but you're just sort of holding tight until the universe or God or whoever you believe in shows it to you, and you can take action, which I've always, again, a lot of people find comfort in that. I actually find that quite disturbing. Like that, like
Yeah.
I
Probably
have
just
stuff
have
to
to
do.
wait.
Like if I have, if there's a purpose, if I have a purpose and it's predetermined, like, wouldn't I be doing it
Right.
already?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
wouldn't I be engaged in that? Wouldn't just not waiting be part of that purpose? So that's where the name came from. Is kind of like this almost like tongue in cheek, very, the main character can find himself in this very stressful and, time of his life. And he's looking back on what he's built and his estranged children, and he doesn't like it. And all of a sudden he gets this chance to like have this huge purpose, but it kind of comes at this huge cost that he doesn't understand yet. And it's the same kind of thing, if he just invested his time doing instead of waiting, he probably wouldn't feel this way when he got to this point in his life. So yeah, but I like the phrase "season of waiting" because it kind of punches like the title of his old Steven Seagal movies, like "Out for Justice,"
Yeah.
or it's the same kind of thing, But I did some testing. It doesn't actually resonate the same way. It actually, people find it a little bit flowery. So, but it's sticking. Like I'm not changing it. Second book, Sickos Are Secrets. So that's it's an expression, at least where I've heard of it is from addiction and rehabilitation treatment. So it's a phrase, I can't remember who said it. Should have looked that up, and I can't remember the entire context. But the idea is that we are only as sick as the secrets that we keep. And so there's this idea that honesty is a very good policy, and that like and again, like the book kind of grows off of this whole motif of like, there's secrets you keep from yourself even, and those are the worst ones, if you can't be honest with yourself about who you are or what you want. Yeah, so that's where this comes from.
It's really interesting to me that you've referenced a few times, this thing about how you look at how many people are reacting to a thing and you have a very different reaction. And I find that really cool thing because it's so much about perspective, like which is again, I'm like, get really excited about thinking about like, well, if we just shift our perspective a little bit, then the whole world changes,
Yeah, big time.
So
yeah, big time. And it's like literally the foundation of empathy, in my opinion, is being able to kind of reframe a situation from another person's point of view.
Right.
And I quite enjoy doing that, trying to understand why, why someone reacts the way they do.
Yeah, that's very much an actor thing, So
it?
We actors do that a lot.
Oh, okay.
It's like, well, okay, if I were in that person's shoes, then why am I thinking this way?
I guess that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know why it would be any different. So my wife has a theater background as well. And she moved into technology a long time ago, but she still carries that with her. And she's said similar things.
Yeah.
So I think it's taught her a lot of empathy.
Cool. Well, let's take a short pause and come right back and continue the conversation. There is nothing like a great book to transport you to new worlds. Here at Pro Audio Voices, we love working on projects that transport the listener. We pay attention to the details, like making sure we have actors that can clearly differentiate the character voices, making for a great listening experience. If you have a book that you would like to get into audio, and you're looking for a team with a personalized approach, Pro Audio Voices might be just the right fit. Come visit us at proaudiovoices.com. All right, so Jim, what would you like your readers to take away from these stories?
I think if I had to sum it up, Becky, I would say there's two things. Yeah. One, I want them to finish the book, like not be able to put it down, and finish the book and be, have that like reader exhaustion of, oh, I did it. It's I know what the story is now. And then put the book away and then not be able to stop thinking about it. Like those are the two things that I want. So like there's the initial punch of the story, but then also like, these parts of the story that stick with them and kind of keep coming up, and whether it's a phrase or a situation but even though like to the point where they're kind of like the book is showing up in their headspace when they're like finding themselves having to make an important decision or something. I don't know. Like, I know it's kind of a ridiculous thing to want that kind of impact, but
no, I don't think so.
But good.
I think that's great.
If you can write that down for me and I can show that to everyone.
Yeah.
Becky says that this is okay.
Definitely.
Thank you. But I mean, because that's how I've always experienced good stories, right? The good ones are the ones that, like, the ones I remember are the ones that do that for me. And it's not always the same thing. It's not a character that stands out. It might be a phrase in the book that, as soon as I read it, it's stuck. It's not coming out. It's sunk into my head. And that's what I'm shooting for. A really good story, but also that second layer of stickiness. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the audiobook specifically,
Mm-hmm.
and the production of these audiobooks. So you chose Scott Allen to be your narrator.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about why you chose Scott.
But I guess it's like, to put some context around for the listener right now, I guess like the process was, y'all made it so dirt simple. Like, I kind of told you what I wanted, in a voice, and you delivered like a handful of folks to choose from, which sidebar, that's like a huge Dear Diary moment for someone like me. Like, I wrote a chapter and now it's being read by someone who's like pouring their heart and soul into making it sound amazing, and so yeah, it was a real Dear Diary moment. So yeah, I gave him a listen, and I mentioned my wife and her theater background. I forced her to sit down and listen to it too. She's not a fiction person, but she did it for me because she loves me.
Yeah.
And her theater background was really helpful in landing on Scott. Because I was kind of like, well, I like the Gary Sinise part of this guy's voice, and I like this, And she's like, listen to Scott again, and he was already in like the top two, and I was listening, and then she's like, do you hear it? I'm like, do I hear what? Like, I hear Scott. She's like, no, like, he's connecting with the scene. And it took me a couple of tries to kind of process what she was saying, but now that we've kind of gone through the whole rigmarole, and I'm hearing what Scott's produced, what he's produced, I know exactly what my wife was saying. So it's just amazing. Like, someone like Scott, who can, that takes this book that's coming from different points of view. Every chapter kind of moves around into a different person's head, without dialogue, without a character voice, just the way he's talking through the prose, you can tell who it is, right? And that is amazing to me. Like, I would not know where to start doing that, how to develop that skill. And it was like, and like, that kind of magic was everywhere in what Scott was producing. And everything from the way that he, the different cadences that he would use to kind of pace, his way through a narrative, is exactly the way it sounds in my head, and so that was a really good marriage there. Yeah. And then, once I met him, which was hilarious, that was a hilarious, not hilarious, haha, I guess, but very coincidental. Like, we both have day jobs, and we work for competitors of each other.
Oh, that's so funny.
Didn't know. Yeah. So, which I just think that's hilarious. But once I met him, and he was just really, he was down to earth, and he connected with the story. He knew, he was invested in it, and so it was just and again, like, as an independent author, that's just huge.
Yeah.
You talk about a story sticking, like, that's what I mean. So yeah, but
That's great. So what would you say? Like, what about the audiobook production process stands out to you the most, or in addition to the casting, perhaps?
I mean, I'm having trouble choosing. Like, if you're wondering why I'm pausing, it's because I'm having trouble choosing. But I mean, like, I remember getting, okay, here it is. So, like, when you write a novel, or at least when I do, when I'm writing these novels, there's a layer of control that I have over what goes on the page, right? And then you're knowingly giving up some of that control when you hand it off to an author. It's why we have auditions, and we, try to feel comfortable with each other. But I wrote the story, okay? I wrote this story. I know it word for word. I've edited it so many times. It got to the point, like, doing the proofs of Scott's reading, I had to stop listening for proofs so I could hear the story and, like, get to the next part. And I wrote it. Like,
yeah.
Like, how, like, I know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, I wrote this story, and yet I can't not get engaged with the storytelling that Scott's putting behind everything. And that was like, that pleased me to no end, right? Because that tells me, like, Scott's doing a great job. The story's really good. Like, I've heard it, I wrote it, and I still want to know what happens.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
So that was a real humdinger. I had to laugh at myself for that one. But honestly, I think there's certain passages in the book that were super important to me, like not in any, like I want them read a certain way or anything. I trusted Scott with all of that. But just like his delivery, he knew exactly what, and you just get those chills or that creep up your spine, and it's all just right there. And so it's almost like you're experiencing the story like as the reader would, and it's sort of like you lose that a little bit when you're an author. You kind of, all the secrets that are in there, where you can shine the light in all the corners, but the reader can't, without your help. But Scott kind of brought some of that magic back.
That's so cool.
The story.
It makes me think of, are the oral storytelling traditions that we have are built on the telling and retelling and retelling and retelling of the same story, and
Absolutely.
yet it'll modify a little bit here and there, but the stories are powerful, and I think that's a little bit of what we get a taste of here in the experience of having your story that well being told by a great storyteller. So that's cool. Yeah. Well, how can our listeners learn more about you and about your stories? What's your website or the best place for them to stay engaged with what's happening in your writing world?
Well, yes, I would say go to my website, which is jimwritesbooks.com. And that's where I'm posting updates. And there's links to all the other ways that I keep people up to date in there too. So there's a mailing list you can subscribe to and get free stuff.
Great.
And Facebook groups and Twitter and whatever. But that's probably the easiest way.
Yeah.
I'm trying to ramp up, I entered this realm, this part of my life in the middle of COVID, right? Yeah. So I haven't left my house as a writer yet, really. So and there's conferences and stuff, and I'd love to start going to those, but I haven't even, I don't even know which one.
Yeah.
even know which ones are out there, and I haven't done any of that homework yet. So hoping that happens in 2023, but we'll see.
See, it used to be that writers would be hermits just naturally, and the rest of the world was out there doing things. And now it's like, we writers, we're just like everybody else. We're all hermited away.
Well, it's going to make for some boring stories out of me if I can't get out of my house.
Yeah, we're all hoping to get out.
Watching other people.
Yeah,
exactly.
Great. Well, Jim, I want to thank you so much for spending this time with me. This is, again, Jim Christopher, author of the Utopian Testament series, 2 books so far, Season of Waiting, Book 1, and Sick as Our Secrets. Jim, thanks so much.
Thank you, Becky.
Thanks for joining us for Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. Please take a moment to subscribe at audiobookconnection.com. The podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and please join us next week.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.